blanket and universal term for people that are serving in these programs. The people in the programs don't call themselves my labs. They'll say they're in this program or that program. My lab is something that was coined outside of the programs and is used in presentations such as this one. So now, just before I was 6, I was brought in, and they began to, how they brought me in was that they did testing on me, and standardized testing in school. And through that standardized testing, they were able to identify me as an intuitive empath. And there are a lot of intuitive empaths out there, but ones that have genetic predisposition and spiritual disposition to be able to be used by the military to interface with extraterrestrials is a much lower number, especially in the military. They can't hardly find them. When they do, they utilize them, they overutilize them. So intuitive empaths that are good at or have the ability to interface with these beings are highly coveted and sought after. So, and when you're brought into the different programs, you're treated like an outsider as well. So let's say if you're in one MyLab program and you're sent to support a secret access program, technology program, you'll go in and you'll be treated as an outsider, mainly because of your age and you don't have military training. The MyLab programs are not as prevalent now. They're not bringing people out of schools and bringing them in unbeknownst to their parents. A lot of the people that are youths that are going into these programs are going in with their parents' blessing. Most of them are former military and have signed contracts that made it possible as well. So they're not pulling them out of the public sector as much as they were in the past. A lot of it has to do with all of the media has been concentrating on my labs. David, do you have anything to add about my labs?
Okay, excellent. David, thank you for joining us. And we were talking about the My Labs, so jump on in.
I don't hear my voice in my headphones, but are you guys hearing me as my mouth is moving?
Yes, we're hearing you, correct.
And is the quality of my audio consistent?
You're very clear, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Corey's at a hotel. We won't say which one, but the hotel internet might be a little bit lacking in quality.
Yes, very much so.
He's definitely not sounding as ideal as he could, but yeah, I mean, I've been aware of this stuff for a long time. There's actually an illustration in my book somewhere of what appears to have been my lab contact that I had in high school, where I drew these extraterrestrials. Let's see if I can find it here. There's a log of images at the front. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, here we go. 155. This is actually the book hasn't been released yet, but they sent me some copies of it. So I don't know if you can see this, but if you look carefully at this illustration, this is something I drew in high school when I was, obviously my name wasn't Marcia Shalou yet. That only came later in my life. You know, the transition's going very well.
That's a joke for everybody.
Because I'm listed as Marcia Shalou, right? So if you look here, this was something that I drew after I was listening to the Rolling Stones and the song Sister Morphine, and Mick Jagger sings, "Why Does the Doctor Have No Face?" And this image flashes into my mind. Now, what you see here is, it looks like possibly a UFO hovering over someone lying on his back on the ground, and there's two people bended at the waist looking down at him with the UFO hovering over them as if I was being contacted or in the process of levitation. But then if you really look closely, what's weird about this is that the jaws on these beings, now they're not really grays, are they? They got this weird square military jaw. And it was only years later that I figured out, okay, maybe this is a MyLab, and it doesn't appear that most people who go through this ever remember anything at all. From what Corey has shared with me and some other insiders I've spoken to, this is actually far, far more widespread than people realize. Would you agree with that, Corey?
Absolutely. And one of the technologies they use does not allow you to see their face.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You see a blur in front of the face, or just nothing.
I mean, it's a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around, because we're dealing with an oppressive society of secretive people who are messing with us, and there's nothing we can do about it. I think it's important to maintain perspective on this and realize that there are cosmic laws of free will, and we are being returned unharmed. Most of the people that are going through this are not having any lasting damage from this. So there is some kind of a contact taking place, but I don't think that some of these more horrible fear porn scenarios are actually what's happening to people, even if they are having this contact. So,
and I just wanted to add one thing as well, David. From I've interviewed several super soldiers all over the world that have come forward, and from what I understand is that they get put into like sort of trip chairs like the Matrix, and they sort of extract their soul and put them into avatars to send them on missions to the jungle of Thailand or whatever. So there's
all that stuff is done. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Gotcha.
One of the things that was fascinating, many things that are fascinating in terms of when Corey and I started to compare notes, was that my colleague, Dr. Pete Peterson, actually invented a technology that uses what they call the ports on your back. And actually there's a chapter in this called Pete Peterson, the Tesla of Black Ops, in which I described this invention. The government was doing research on the nervous system, and they found that all the nerves cross over into like a radial pattern in the middle of your shoulder blade. So if you actually feel around here on your shoulder blade, you'll notice there's like a little dip or a little divot in there. And that's actually what they found when they traced out the nerves, is that for some reason that seems to have nothing to do with human survival or any value in any regular evolutionary or biological sense, there's this massive nexus of crisscrossing nerves that go throughout the whole body that intersect right on these points in the shoulder blades. And so he was able to invent something that can actually pump these longitudinal waves or scalar waves, special type of energy, into those points and actually introduce visual images, audio, and thoughts directly into the mind. And we recently demonstrated this to a very well-known Las Vegas tycoon. He was taken into a fighter jet that was parked at one of these military bases in the area. And they allowed him, because the fighter jets, you don't need windows anymore because of this technology. So it's a vision system. And you have these two little metal nubs that go into your ports on your back. And then you can see with your eyes closed whatever you want to look at. And it also has binocular zooming vision. And this is something that I started to talk to Corey about, and he knew all about it because he'd actually used it. So they do use this technology. It's not like the movie The Matrix where they're jacking in through the back of your head. It's actually your shoulder blades. But the point is, the technology does exist. I know who invented it, and there's a whole chapter on that in my new book. So this is all part of things we're going to be able to have access to once we get disclosure. You can download whole languages. You can download all kinds of information directly into your mind.
Yeah, you can get a college education in about 30 minutes.
It's true. I mean, it's one thing to hear about this stuff. It's another thing when you can interview the person who invented it and get like 2 or 3 hours of much more information depth than you'd ever be able to comprehend, and ask questions and get answers that are so specific that you basically get lost within the first 5 minutes, and you just kind of meditate and hope that you can maybe understand some of what he's explaining to you. You know, I have a fairly good idea of it. He didn't give me enough technical detail to understand exactly how the waves are created or how they generate thoughts, but you can basically record thoughts from one person and replay them into someone else. You can take visual images from a camera and turn them into thought forms that actually appear in the brain as visual images. And apparently it has an incredible zoom capability. So it makes it's like you have a God's eye view. You have much better vision with much more telescopic capability than you normally would have as a regular human being. It's quite amazing stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the remote optics that they use in a secret space program craft, there's not a lens, there's not a camera, but they're able to view vast different distances and zoom up incredibly close on them.
Yeah, that's consistent with exactly what we demonstrated to this Vegas tycoon. And his quote, we can't say the last word because it's a 4-letter word, but you know, the first 3 words that he said before the 4th one were "holy goddamn," and so we call it the "holy goddamn machine" in the book.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, look, when you look at movies like Divergent and Ender's Game, and you see people in these movies that are running through simulations, they're not really talking fictionally. The first review came in of the book because, you know, the major publishing houses get an advanced look at it, and we got a review from Publishers Weekly, and it was quite frosty. And they're kind of, I talk about how fiction discloses the reality, and they're talking in the, you know, when they reviewed the book, they basically said something about how I'm trying to legitimize my fantasies of science fiction as if they're actually factual. But what is going on, and we all know this already, everybody listening I'm sure is aware of this, they're using fiction to tell you the truth so that if somebody like me or Corey comes forward and tries to tell you the truth, they say, oh, he's just a fan of that movie or this movie or whatever. He loved The Matrix. He loved Divergent, you know. No, they're showing you exactly what they do in these films. That's why they're made.
As you pointed out in Wisdom Teachings from the Sony hack, we saw how closely Sony and other similar companies work with DARPA and other military industrial complexes.
That's exactly correct. This is a little known fact. WikiLeaks hacked the Sony emails, and of course the mainstream media got all upset about it and said, we can't believe this was done. It's such an invasion of privacy. Everybody has a basic right to privacy. Our right was violated. Da, 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 da. Okay, dude, I get you, right? I wouldn't want my emails blown all over the internet. I don't always say the most loving things on my emails, but if you were to find out that I was actually receiving money and tutoring from RAND, which is the military industrial complex think tank, and that people are coming over to my house to have meetings about how I can basically promote that agenda, there was never supposed to be a direct link between the military industrial complex and films, and yet now we have absolute undeniable proof in these emails that DARPA and RAND and these other types of agencies that are, because RAND is just the front, right? It's got DARPA behind it, it's got DIA, it's got these other agencies, that they are actually having full-day meetings at Sony. And what's even crazier is that they're giving exact notes on how certain films should or should not be worded. One of the most interesting things also was some notes from RAND on how to word an article about Snowden, in which all of the aspects of wording that would imply that the U.S. had done anything wrong are sanitized, and it becomes that Snowden's the bad guy and that these are just normal bulk data collection things that are going on. Nothing bad at all. So yeah, we know this stuff. We know there's a direct connection between the military industrial complex and the media. And Corey and I are almost a lone voice in terms of the scope of the disclosure. We've had threats against our lives. It's ongoing. It's not necessarily a fun job, but we're doing it, and the payoff is worth the sacrifice. If we get full disclosure, the effect that's going to have on our society is unimaginable. To have a portal in your own home, and you can portal over to Pluto and have a friend on Pluto, that's going to be our daily reality. You're not going to have to worry about this, and most people can't even imagine that that's what's coming so soon in our future, but it is. If we get the full disclosure, that's what we're going to have.
I just wanted to also quickly add, someone like a very prominent guy, Robert De Niro, put together an amazing documentary on vaccinations, and what they do, they shut him down real quick, and that's from his son that got a vaccination and now has, was messed up by it. So we see this across the board. So as David and all of us are doing is we need to unify and get this information out there. And I just want to say, we had a couple questions really quick. David, I recently read on your website a comment that references one of your comments, that being you stating we live on a flat earth. I hadn't heard at all. In fact, quite opposite. I'm confused. Can you clarify that, David?
Okay. let's talk about this, because I'm doing a new video for YouTube right now about this problem. Corey and I are probably going to tape together on this because he's in Boulder right now, as he just said in his last vlog. So there are like 20 different YouTube channels that all appear to be run by the NSA or some other division thereof of a similar type of group. And they are rampantly taking old radio shows that I did, and this goes back to interviews from 2007, 2009, 2010, and they're saying, new 2016, David Wilcock, da-da-da, and we've identified already 3 different channels that actually use my name and my photograph and are posing as if they were me. And then they're answering people's comments. They're putting up videos. In some cases, the videos get well over a 5-figure number of hits because I've got this branding out there from being on Ancient Aliens and having the 2 shows on Gaia that are weekly shows, et cetera, et cetera. Look, this flat earth thing is a fucking joke. Excuse my French. There is no flat earth. If you walk from one side of the earth to the other or you sail in a sailboat, you're going to go back to where you started. Okay, you're not going to fall off the edge. And I'm sorry, but this whole thing is a deliberately designed con from the NSA groups in order that certain individuals in our community could be lured in by a narrative that's going to make them look absolutely troglodyte ridiculous to everybody else in our community who may be an awakening person to the truth. Look, we can go all the way back to Aristarchus and his simple depictions of the roundness of the earth using, you know, stuff like a sextant and simple rods in the ground. And we can go into things like the Coriolis effect and the fact that when you fire a cannon that you have to bend the target from where you think it would go because the cannon's actually going to spin in the air based on the rotation of the round earth. And the thing that I find most ridiculous is probably a lot of the people that are putting this stuff out, the videos themselves are actually run by the government. They're made by government agents. And then the people who appear to be supporting those videos and being so argumentative in the comments sections, they also are government agents. None of this stuff is true. You look at the moon, you can see it's a ball and that it's rotating, you know, based on where the sun's phase angles are. So for God's sake, don't get sucked into the flat earth nonsense. It's just a joke.
Yes,
Thank you for clarifying that.
and the flat earth was originally a thought experiment by the NSA, and it also for some NASA tie-ins as well, is to see how well they could affect the belief systems and understanding of certain groups of people. So it's kind of deeper experiment. There's a deeper experiment behind it as well.
And Corey, a quick question for you. How can you validate that the info from the inner Earth civilizations are true? I'm referring to the ones Martinez lived for a short time. Any information on that, please?
Yeah, well, I can only go off of my intuitive abilities to be able to say what they're saying is true. You know, there are so many different trickster beings out there that I approach all of them saying that I don't just sit there and get all doe-eyed and wide-eyed. I'm in contact with another being, and then just, oh, tell me all the knowledge. You know, if you're that way, you're going to get twisted up very quickly. There are a lot of trickster beings out there pretending to be from the light. Now, Gonzalez.
You definitely want to project your voice, buddy, because when you get that quiet, you're basically non-audible.
Okay, I may have to lift this up here. It's mine. Gonzalez stayed with them for a protracted long period of time compared to any other humans that I know of. And he ended up wearing out his welcome because he was walking around, he was pacing off all the corridors, making mental maps, and was trying to gather intelligence for the SSP Alliance. And there are people in the SSP Alliance that do not take everything that the inner Earth groups say as gospel. So they're investigating them. from the military standpoint, these inner Earth groups have lied to them in the past. They told them they're from other star systems. They've just given them information that threw them off of the trail that would lead them back to their headquarters or where they reside. So that has a lot of the people in the military and industrial complex a little bit leery of believing everything that these groups say.
And David, this is a question maybe you can answer, or this is coming from Krista in Sedona, one of my star sisters. Shout out to Krista. She wants to say first that she loves both you guys and thanks you both for your service.
Cool.
And follows your work. She wants to know, was there a trial recently held with certain Dracos being held accountable for their Earth crimes? Any information on that?
No, nothing like that has happened according to my intelligence.
Yeah, there's a big difference between what's going to happen and what's happened. I want to also respond. We'll get back to that. I want to respond to what Corey was saying on the previous question first, and that is we do have some pretty interesting corroborations that have taken place. Corey had met with me privately and had told me about a particular inner Earth group that had a kind of an extended nose. And then we went and saw Jupiter Ascending, the movie. And in the movie, he's sitting next to me in the movie theater because we watched it together. It was the first time he'd come out to Los Angeles before anybody knew who he was, or his face was not public, his name was not public. We watched this film, and as he saw that being in the movie, his whole body goes, and he actually gasped. And then we find out that there was this thing called the Shaver Mysteries. This guy, Richard Shaver, claimed that he'd been brought to the inner Earth and was given all this information about beings that looked the same with this kind of elephant-type trunk nose. And then we found another guy online who calls them the Darrow, and his name is Brenton Sawin, I believe. And he is claiming that he had contact from these beings, very negative abduction attempt. So the inner Earth is a subject that very few people have interfaced with. Very few people seem to have had these experiences. But I was able to not only correlate these different things together, because Corey had never heard of the Shaver Mysteries, yet a lot of what they say in there validates very nicely what he said. I presented about this 2 years ago at Contact in the Desert. And I probably will do some kind of video about this. So the inner Earth thing is also mirrored in the Law of One. And it was funny because there's people who are portraying themselves as if they were Law of One experts and then saying, oh, there's nothing about the inner Earth in the Law of One. David's making it all up. Corey's making it all up. So there's a bunch of Wisdom Teachings episodes that go back maybe to earlier this year that I did on Gaia, where you can actually watch them, and I'm showing you quote after quote after quote after quote from the Law of One about inner Earth civilizations, that they're part of this so-called confederation that's guiding our evolution, our ascension, and that they are going to be very pivotal in the ascension process. So it makes sense that if they do exist, that they would start by contacting people like Corey and getting us ready for this big change that they're anticipating is going to happen. Regarding the Draco, they are not so much on trial right now as that they are trying to escape our planet because they're anticipating either a kill shot type event or a trial or both. And what has happened, which is really exciting, is that the military industrial complex here on Earth, which is partly controlled by the good guys, what we're calling now the Earth Alliance. I used to just call them the Alliance before I'd heard about a secret space program alliance. The Earth Alliance has technology now capable of shooting down Draco ships. So there have been efforts of the Draco to try to escape, primarily from the area of Antarctica, and they have been summarily shot down. So there's a large contingent of them in Antarctica. They have massive bases under the ice there, where there's these natural volcanic pockets that keep it warm enough that they can breathe and live, and they're not able to escape. So in the future, it does appear that we will see some sort of public trials coming out. And it's an exciting development that I've been asked actually in my dream state if I would participate in those, and I answered that I would. So it's going to be intense. I mean, when people find out what's been done to them, it's going to be shocking. And I'd like to throw this back to Corey for a second because he has an update that we really need to get out on this show, and that was just released in his part 1 that he put out a couple days ago about a different extraterrestrial civilization, very similar to humans, that were also enslaved by the Draco, and they have already thrown them off. So, Corey, why don't you just briefly, because I know we need to cover this, so you probably should get it in there while we have a chance.
Sure. Yes. On a fairly recent meeting where I was taken by a blue spear to talk to your era, when I arrived, there was a person, call them people, there was a person, silhouette, standing next to him. And as they got closer, I saw that it was not a human from Earth. He had skin texture that looked very much like you see in North Africa, like in Libya, Egypt, those kinds, those countries. They had a kind of an orange, it's an orange hue to it, a little bit, an orange glow. So he spoke to me in perfect English without any accent. It blew my mind. I expected some sort of nonverbal communication. And he let me know that they had been studying us for a long period
Corey,
of time.
you got to hold your mic closer to your mouth. A lot of people can't hear you.
Okay. He informed me that his people had been watching our people for a long period of time. They had been watching our television, our radio. They've been all through our internet, and they were gathering information on us because they want to come after we have thrown off the shackles like they did, because a few generations ago. And, one thing I didn't add is he said that their life cycle was 300 revolutions around their star. So that, and whatever their year is, you couldn't equate it over to Earth year or anything. So what he also communicated was that in the past, his people had been on Earth as refugees, that many times in the past, the Earth had been sort of an ET commune almost, that many different groups that were having issues in their star system came to Earth and found refuge and lived relatively in peace with the inhabitants here and each other. So that's, is there something else?
Well, Corey, they also told you, or Mika, this guy's name was Mika, he also told you that, and this is just, I have the same information everybody else does because I read the update you wrote, that he told you that in the future, we could end up collaborating with them, right?
Yes, that's the whole reason. Yeah, the whole reason that they have been studying us is that he told me that the problems of his people were not as significant as ours, complicated as ours on Earth, but that there were enough correlations that they would be very instrumental and helpful in our transition after we've thrown off the shackles. And it's the same group that had enslaved his people, the Draco Alliance, which is made up of reptilian and these insectoids, as well as these tall, blonde, fairly big foreheaded beings with 6 fingers that a lot of people will call Nordics, but they are a human race, that they're a conquered race that are in sort of